Hello, legal egos, learners, and luminaries. Welcome to our session on Who Wanna Be a Lawyer. Today, we are joined by Antonida Kocharova. She's barrister and she is based in Oxford. Thank you very much for joining us, Antonida. So, why on earth somebody should become a lawyer?
Well, hello again, Zavira. It's good to talk to you. Good to talk to everybody who's watching us, whether now or later. That's a big question, isn't it? Why you would want to be a lawyer? And actually, there's so many different reasons. I might start with kind of introducing myself a little bit and explaining how I got into this. So I'm actually Russian as well as English, and I grew half my childhood up in Russia, and then my family came over here. So I was always quite academic, and that was a fairly natural pathway through. When you get to the question of what do I do at university, you end up looking through all the different subjects, and I thought, law, what an interesting subject. And the reason it was interesting for me is because I could see the relevance. By that point, I was seeing in general life that, everywhere you go, and there's something there, something that you need to know about how contracts work, or what duties you have to other people, or what different things you need to consider with your neighbors, or various family disputes. And so for me, law sounded actually like it was most relevant. And in many ways, whereas with other subjects, you find you have to, that you go into quite a lot of depth and detail and learn far more complicated concepts. When you study law, actually, most of what you're dealing with is fairly straightforward. And so much more breadth and far less depth at an early stage. And so there we go. I went to study law at Oxford University, which was a good, fun course to go into, because not only did we do law, but we went into jurisprudence and philosophy of it all, and some historical Roman law. And then came the next question, what do I do next? And for me, so I became a barrister, and I'm now practicing at 3PB Chambers. I'm based in Oxford, but it's a large chambers that covers the whole of the UK almost, and so it's quite a wide field of practice. And you might be asking, what on earth is a barrister? And a barrister is the kind of lawyer that goes to speak in court. And in the UK, in England and Wales at least, we divide the profession up into solicitors and barristers. And the solicitor is the lawyer you would go to if you have an initial problem, legal problem. They would take your initial instructions, work out what's going on, what the problem is, how to solve it. They would look after, prepare all the documentation, take all the steps, make sure all the right court applications are made. And then the barrister comes in either to advise on something very particular and specialist, or to turn up in court and have the argument. So for me, that was an easy choice, really, because I like to have an argument. And so that's where I ended up.
So if somebody is listening to us and they are just thinking about which profession to choose, why would you advise them to choose law? Because it just seems to me very complicated that first you go to university and then you graduate with a law degree, but you're basically not professionally qualified. And then you have to choose whether you want to become a solicitor and whether you want to become a barrister, and then you have to do apprenticeship, then you have to apply for license. It seems very complicated. Why should we do it?
Well, I'll tell you what, with the majority of degrees you might choose at university, they're not going to get you the career. If you go and study English, you're not a journalist instantly. If you go study maths, again, you're not going to be a banker. It doesn't follow through. And if you study science, well, there's so much of it. You might be studying X bit, and then what you end up doing later on is a completely different field. So most university courses are only a starting point, and they're useful. Whatever it is you do is useful for teaching you how to reason, how to think, how to problem solve, how to communicate later on. Now, where law is different is law gives you empowerment. And that's my headline. It empowers you to help yourself in life. Any problem, you're in a shop and something's faulty, you are dealing with a difficult friend, you have some property issue, good problems with your landlord. You have the power. If you got a law degree, at least you know where to start. You can help others, and that's a big part of it. And no matter how much we pretend we don't, but most of us are in it to try and do some form of justice and try and achieve it, even if it is for a few individuals. But you do have that power to help others, and God, do you know it? Every single lawyer out there. I mean, you must know, any friends and family saying, "Oh, I've got this one thing. Do you know?" And every time I had to say, "Oh, well, no, I don't know that area of law, and I don't know that one, but I could help you on this one tiny bit of civil procedure." But overall, you are empowered to help other people, and it's empowering also because it's such a broad subject, and it gives you a broad knowledge base and skill set that is applicable to any job. You've done a law degree, you can become a politician. You've done a law degree, you can become a teacher. What better skill? If you have learned in law how to simplify things down to its basic components and to communicate it effectively, you'd need that as a teacher. You'd need that in basically any profession. So that, for me, is kind of why law is quite unique as a subject for studying at university. And other than that, it's just interesting. I mean, it's fun. I've seldom met any people out there, some people will like, for example, mathematical questions, algebra, or different issues of topology or similar things. Other people are not. And some people are interested in molecular dynamics, and other people are not. Some people like to read Shakespeare and talk about what he's talking about, others don't. But with law, I've yet to meet someone who doesn't find at least something interesting. Whether it's, if you like your Jane Austen, family law. If you like your sciences, there goes your intellectual property. If you like your history, oh gosh, I know a friend who did his master's dissertation on a historical sales of goods sort of question, and there's just so much to choose from. You like languages, comparative legal studies. There's just something for everyone, and that's why it's fun.
This seems fascinating, like whole issue of interdisciplinarity and empowerment. But how long does it take to become a lawyer? So what are the stages of becoming a lawyer?
That will depend a lot on where you are. So in the UK here, you have to do your qualifying law degree or another degree and then a conversion course. And there's really no difference in terms of your career prospects of which way you go. About 50-50, 50% of lawyers didn't do a law degree to start with, and the other 50 did. Then you have to choose whether you go down the solicitor or the barrister path and do, I think it's a legal practice course for the solicitor path and the a bar training course for the barrister path. I'm not quite sure exactly how it works, but you can find all that information out quite easily from the Bar Council and the Solicitors Regulation Authority. And then you do either a training contract or a pupillage. The training contracts for solicitors, I think, is 2 years. You'll be essentially an apprentice in a firm of solicitors, and you might move between different teams and see what areas you like. Very similar for pupillage for barristers. It's a year long, and you spend 6 months literally shadowing other people to see what they do, have a go at paperwork, do advocacy exercises, and then the next 6 months you're out there and you're still doing a little bit of shadowing and paperwork, but you're also starting to get your own cases that you do in court. So those are the main pathways. There are also some other ways through it. So there are professions of legal executive, there's paralegal routes, legal secretaries, all sorts of different supporting roles, which have slightly different entry pathways. And then, of course, once you're a barrister or a solicitor, you can either stick to your traditional roles, or there's a degree of mixing. So some solicitors take an extra qualification and then they can appear in court, or some courts, I think you're allowed to do it straight away. And then some barristers will get qualified for direct access to accept instructions directly from people without a solicitor in place as well. And then, of course, there's the judicial pathway, which comes a little bit later. So there's quite a lot of different options.
And how competitive it is to, first of all, to get into the law school, and after you have done your law school, then getting into professional qualification, either it is BBP or University of Law, or getting into INS. So how does that process works?
It's difficult to say, because with law schools, it really depends on the university you choose. So usually, with Oxford, I'm not sure what it is now, it was a sort of medium level competitiveness. Some of the London schools are far more competitive. But at the same time, it's a slightly different sort of degree. But there will be universities out there that will, it's fairly easy to find a place, even if it's not your first choice place, in order to get that starting point and get a degree. I think one of our newest pupils starting in September in our chambers actually started off with a degree from the Open University. So it doesn't limit you at that stage where you do your degree. Obviously, you have to kind of get the most out of it, make sure you take it to the fullest, and then work on it with other study. The bar training course and solicitors legal practice course, again, I think are fairly simple to get into, mainly because these are commercial universities that provide them, and so they're quite happy to take anyone. So if anything, I'd be a little bit careful in applying that they're not just taking you because they want your money, and make sure you know where you're going with it. And then when you get to the next stage, that's where the competition really begins. Certainly for the bar, the numbers are ridiculous. You sort of get kind of 100 people to one pupillage often applying, and it keeps getting worse and worse. But having said that, if you want to become a barrister, and you really do, just do it and ignore those numbers, ignore the competition, because half the time it's a mixture of perseverance and working on yourself in order to improve your CV, your skills, your abilities. So there is a lot of competition. I think it's slightly lower for solicitors, and again, that will depend on what firms you're applying to. But it's certainly possible to make it, and most people I know who have really wanted to and kept trying got there in the end.
Well, I mean, it's really, if I were a teenager and thinking about becoming a barrister, and then hearing this from a barrister's mouth that, oh, it's just really difficult, 100 to 1, I mean, it's not encouraging enough, right? So let's say that will really persist and try to make it. Why? What's the worth it? So once become barrister, what, I mean, apart from empowerment and, prestige of being a barrister, in terms of monetary compensation, how is a barrister compared with other professions?
Do you know what? I'd say if you're in it for the money, don't bother, because it's far too much work to bother. You really need to like what you're doing. It really varies on the area of law in which you are. Some areas earn a fairly average, decent wage. If you're in a criminal law at the moment, the pay, certainly in the UK, is atrocious, at least at an early stage. And there are some areas of law, like construction, more commercial areas, which, people earn six-figure salaries and not starting with a one. And quite happily get on with that. So there's a very wide range of different practice areas. But I think the other thing is it's not really, law is not a job, it's not, we're not really in it because that's the only thing we can do. And it's very important not to treat it like the be all and end all of, oh, I want to be a barrister, and if I can't be a barrister, I don't want to do anything else. Because it's not like that. You do that job and you learn so much every day in that job. But ultimately, even if you don't make it to the end through this competition, there will be hundreds of other jobs you can pick up. There's just so many different avenues in which you can use your skills that actually it's not going to be a waste of time. You're going to learn a lot, and it will stand you in good stead for whatever it is you do end up doing. But why would you do it? Because it's a fun job, it's actually every day you get up and you enjoy what you do. And I mean, I'm talking about being a barrister. If we're talking about why would you want to be a lawyer generally, as I say, it's every one of the careers as such, whether you're going to research or being a solicitor or a barrister or any other avenue, actually have their own attractions. I mean, for me, what I love about being a barrister, again, it boils down to empowerment and the fun of it. It's a flexible job. Here I am on a Friday afternoon having a Zoom chat rather than doing any work. It is varied every day. Every case is slightly different. It's complicated, but it's creative. I have to delve into the detail of why there's a particular word being used, and then I have to learn to use that particular word in a way that will convince everybody else that, of course, I'm right. And there's also an element of performance. Certainly for me, and one of the things I really enjoy about being a barrister is when you're in court, or actually when you're just with a client, you are already performing. It's a presentation, it's a play almost. You're telling a story. And yes, you might be telling a story about tax legislation, but that's the art of it. It's the art of taking something nobody thinks they want to know and making it interesting for everyone else. So that's the why, really.
This is quite interesting. I mean, maybe it's very easy for you or for me to say that, look, it's very rewarding and it's great fun to do it. It may be because we have the benefit of hindsight. So we are talking about the things by looking into the troubles that we have actually faced and basically passed through them. I mean, people who are really facing those, it just seems that you're just in front of a wall and it's just there. It will never move. So
I know.
how, I mean, and then the big problem is that there is not much of mentorship available, right? Because it's very competitive. Even sometimes your bosses, people who you should look up for guidance, it seems that they just appear to be your competitors, right? So how to cope with such kind of problems?
Well, I tell you what, It's easy, I think, for people to look up at us and think, oh, well, they've already got, they must have been so easy. But I assure you, it wasn't. And when I was standing there doing those applications, firstly, my applications, some of them were shocking anyway. Secondly, it took me 2 years to get pupillage. I didn't get it first time round. And in every single step of the way, whether we're talking about sitting exams or whether we're talking about interview preparation, I can tell you some horror stories about my own performance in all of those fields. There's nothing special about us once you've got through, absolutely nothing. And the only thing that you have to do, really, you do need to want to do it. If you're not going to be interested, whatever it is you do, you need to follow whatever you love to do, and you can find the interest in law. Maybe you don't know about it and it will turn out to be that thing, but if you're driven to want to achieve that result, you've got much more energy to do it. And yes, you've got to work hard, and that doesn't mean drive yourself into the ground working hard. You don't have to be the best at everything. It's very important not to get bogged down in that. But what you do need is a very stupid amount of confidence, actually, because those numbers that we talk about, 100 to 1, or is it 50 to 1, or somewhere maybe 20 to 1, that doesn't really mean anything. That's not a number that's about you. It's important to know so that you don't think that you're bad if you haven't got a place. But chances are, if you haven't got a place, you're a perfectly good candidate. You just haven't got it yet. And you have to just keep going and ignore all these off-putting things. So assuming you do all that, the reason I say that is because back at the start of this whole process, at every stage of the process, I thought, well, there's no way I can get through the next, I don't know why I'm bothering, because I can't, there's no way this is going to happen. But clearly it has. So that must apply to you as well. And I'm not talking just about me. It's most of my colleagues, for example, you don't have to go to Oxford University. A different university is perfectly fine. You might have some completely different storyline. There are people from all sorts of backgrounds, families, cultures, and again, as an example, in my chambers at 3PB, I'm not sure if we're the largest yet, but we're pretty close up there with 218 people. Now, I haven't even met every one of my colleagues, but it's a large chambers, and we are completely all different from each other. People hold different views. People have different hobbies. Some people do karaoke in their spare time. I sing opera in my spare time. Some people run marathons and so on. Others, there's one person who enjoys carpentry and makes bookshelves and such like in their spare time. Completely different people with completely different interests and different specialisms. And so that's, and different backgrounds, different, there are people who started out, say, in the army, somebody who trained to be a vet first, and just, you don't need to worry about that. The law will find a place for you. You just have to want to take it.
It just seems to me that you just need some sort of leap of faith. Like, imagine somebody who's Oxford grad and then could not find pupillage for 2 years. Like, where to get that confidence from, honestly?
The thing is, the pupillage part is almost easier, because what was difficult is when I was an Oxford grad and I couldn't find myself a basic job. But for a good year, for months I was looking after graduating, and all right, I got a 2-1. It wasn't a first, but there I was sitting there in Oxford thinking, how do I fund my BPTC? I needed a job. And I applied for every single admin position I could find in the university and outside, and receptionist roles, your development office roles, anything I could think of. And the only thing I could get at that stage was a job at a post office. There I was behind a counter, stamps, would you like special delivery? Would you like to buy some travel money, or perhaps do your passport check? And at the time that seemed like a bit of a failure. But I tell you what, that job was possibly more useful than the rest of it, actually, because not only did it give me a lot of skills that then I actually use as a barrister, because there you are, you're actually presenting to people, you're selling, so you need your arguments, you are working with people under pressure, it's a constant queue where they always want you to speed up, and sometimes you get someone very vulnerable who can't remember why they turned up to the post office in the first place, and so on and so forth. We once had a robbery at the post office, so there's a lot of fun stories to go back to. So, and there's an awful lot of knowledge you have to hold in your head. You'd think you're a post office or working in a shop, it's a menial job. Actually, incredibly useful skills. And what was crucial about it was that on my application, it stood out far better than the dozens of paralegals and judicial assistants who turned out, and that's how some of my colleagues still remember me. Oh, you're the post office girl. But so you just have to believe that you are worth it. That's the point you've got to believe. And then you have to work out what evidence you've got from your life that demonstrates it. And that evidence is going to come whether from your traditional, you've done all the moots and you've won all the moots and you've done your first class degree and your work experience and your mini pupillage. Yes, that's one way of showing it. Or you think, well, I haven't got all that, but clearly I'm able to have a good argument with someone, right? Obviously. What about your life actually will show that? And you can find those. It's a bit like arguing your own case. You find the evidence in whatever it is that you've got.
It seems to me that there is so much uncertainty. Like, I mean, the moment you finish your law school, then it's really kind of, first of all, trying to find a contract, because if you just get contract, then your law firm is likely to pay for your LPC, whether you want to become a solicitor or if you want to become a barrister. And well, if you have some other source of income, you can sponsor yourself to get that professional qualification. But still, you need pupillage or you need some kind of apprenticeship in order to qualify as a lawyer. So each stage then involves so much uncertainty. How to deal with that problem?
The thing is, you've just got to accept that the whole of life is one big long period of uncertainty. Whatever you do or don't do, you're never going to know what's ahead. And it doesn't stop once you get through it. You just, you have to learn to embrace it. Embrace the flexibility and the change. And understand that even if you have got through that, you have other uncertainties. Are you going to make enough in your fees? Are you going to manage to do the work well? What if you're negligent one of these days? Everybody makes mistakes. What if something else happens? You get a complaint from a client. There's all these uncertainties. What if I've got colleagues of 20 years standing who are respected professionals in their fields, and they will say, I'm sure there's a mistake and I'm not meant to be here. That uncertainty just doesn't go away. There's no easy answer, but except for the fact that you have to trust yourself to your own fate in that sense, and actually just let it take you wherever you're meant to be.
Yeah, I mean, related to that issue is now this whole issue of AI, and there is lots of research and scholarship available that, look, very soon we will not need these lawyers, or at least paralegals will just become extinct because we have AI, right?
That's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And I tell you why, because it's very easy to say, sort of quickly summarize some of the laws. There's just too much. And there's no way to replace the experience that you get from seeing how it actually works, because it's one thing for it to be written on paper, but there are an awful lot of laws which depend upon an exercise of discretion. And until you've figured out how judges exercise their discretion, you're not really going to be able to teach a computer how to do it. And as far as I know, computers haven't learned to do that yet. They can spot patterns in pictures and patterns in sounds. They can't necessarily spot patterns and concepts. As an example, so one of the areas of law that I deal with is divorce and matrimonial finance. How the main bit of law in that, and there's a section 25 of the Matrimonial Causes Act, lists a number of factors that the court must take into account when deciding how to divide two people's assets when they divorce. Now, on top of those factors, there's a whole load of case law that then says the decision must be fair. You have to consider needs and an equal division and possibly compensatory principles. Now, how on earth is a computer going to decide what fairness is in that particular situation? And the only way we know, and even we sometimes don't know, because each individual situation is unique. So courts can sometimes decide it differently than you would expect. And until you've seen a lot of the time the judicial process going on in their heads, then you won't be able to predict what it is. And you might think, well, that sounds a bit unfair because you don't know what's going on. But actually, part of the fairness of it is that it's such a complicated concept that it wouldn't be fair if you chose one answer to it. You need a range of judges deciding these issues slightly differently. Well, not specifically slightly differently, but you need them to interpret it with their experiences in mind in order to find the fair answer. And overall, on a bigger scale, that kind of balances out, even if you don't know at once. But I don't think AI can replace lawyers. Maybe and hopefully soon AI can replace us from making bundles or photocopying and all that sort of thing. That would be great. And indeed, it could replace us having to travel to different places in order to have a short hearing. Again, something we've finally achieved, but it's not going to replace, because you can't put in the creativity, even if you could put in the logic.
Okay, great. That's fantastic. So you're very optimistic about technology and legal profession, right? So let me then ask you another question, which is also asked by many people, and our audience are also asking. That's about emotional burden, being a lawyer. So you mentioned that you're a divorce lawyer or in criminal lawyer, specifically when violent crimes are involved, and more specifically when vulnerable people like children or elderly people are involved. So it's just very taxing emotionally. So how do you or lawyers generally deal with such type of issues?
I think, first of all, you have to be true to yourself. You have to know your own mental state. You have to know your own traumas and understand what affects you and what doesn't. With a lot of these sorts of cases, when I deal with, say, children and arguments about children, or people with dementia, or there's a lot of catharsis in being able to help them. You're improving the position for them. You're making their lives a bit easier. And so for me, I get overall a positive emotional feedback, because I come into a situation and it is what it is. If somebody's parents aren't doing a great job and the local authority is involved, that's a sad situation, but it's not your fault that it's like that. You can only come in and make a difference for the future. And at that point, I don't know, maybe I'm just very good at putting up that emotional wall to it. I don't think that's quite true, because I think that you end up feeling a tiredness in a different way after it's all done because of the amount of pressure in it. Some people find it more traumatic to deal with these sorts of cases. I haven't come across a case yet, although there are more serious cases I haven't dealt with yet where it might happen, where I've been sort of personally affected in that way. But it does take your energy out of you, basically. You know, you have to keep up this positivity that maybe I'm giving off now, very much is the positivity you have to keep up throughout the whole case. You have to be the strong person for your client, and the strong person for the court in order to put that point across and fight that case. And when you're done, you need to recognize the impact it's had, and you need to have a good rest and really not force yourself to do back-to-back bits of work that are all going to affect you in the same way, and then you're going to burn out and not be able to work again. So recognize it, you take a rest, you talk about it to your friends and family. You know, obviously you're not going to give out confidential details, but in general, I had a case today where such a, you know, this person did this thing and you know, their child. So be open, be sensitive to your own needs in that sense. But also from my perspective, what I do is I don't stick to just one area. And this is why, so for me, I've got a mixture of family and property work. And it makes it a little bit easier when I've had a run of divorce cases or Children Act cases, for example, then actually somebody gives me the instructions to write an advice on a boundary dispute. And I think that's wonderful. Let me just focus on the simple logic of property law, not worry about, you know, the emotional side of it. And that gives me a break in that way.
Okay, great. That's interesting that you can actually have variety of work. So if you're finding it emotionally difficult in one area, and maybe you're finding some area quite dry, you may just, you know, choose between different areas. So one of the questions that our audience are asking is that law seems to be very consuming. You said you got to love your profession, right? So it's more than a job. So the question which audience are asking us here is that then how to keep a balance between professional and personal life if you're a practitioner?
Yeah, right. That's a very important question. And I think this is where I'm going to say something that completely conflicts with that, which is actually sometimes you have to remind yourself it is just a job, ultimately. And that's important because both those things are true, and it's a dialectic. We have to, you know, keep in mind that at the same time, it's important to enjoy what you're doing if you possibly can, but also make sure you set your own hours. You know, don't let people mess you around. Find the firms or the chambers or whatever organizations that will understand you. And it may be, of course, wherever you are, that might not be possible initially, but drive that change as soon as you have the power. Make sure that well-being and general work-life balance is put at the forefront of the agenda. With me, as a barrister, I'm self-employed. I have a diary system with chambers. If I need time out, I will take time out. And that's not always just because I need time out. Sometimes I want to do something like see friends, and the only convenient day is on a Tuesday. Sometimes I just want to sit around and do very little at all. Sometimes I do a lot of extracurricular activities, and I've got singing is my other kind of passion that I do alongside. And there's ways and means of mixing that. But the first and most important thing is you set those boundaries. You don't answer emails when you're not working. You don't even read them, to be honest. You don't let people ask you to do for something that you're not, they're not going to pay you for, unless this is the way you're doing it intentionally. You set your boundaries, you set your rules, you don't work yourself to death. And ultimately, you just remember that if you try out this job and you find you hate it in 3 years' time or however long, that's not wasted time. You can take those skills and say, actually, this particular profession is not for me. I'm going to go and find another job in the legal world or the non-legal world, and go and do that and try that instead. And that's part, again, it's part of the fun of it, is the point where you recognize the empowerment it's given you when you achieve this, you've got there, and then you think, but my family is more important. And you make sure that everybody else knows what's important, but push your own agenda. You've got to advocate for yourself in that way. But yes, it's very important not to make it too vocational. And it's vocational in the sense that, if there's a dinner time conversation, I can't switch off my knowledge. And if someone says, oh, well, I bought this kettle and it just stopped working instantly, I know to say, right, well, you've got so many days in order to go and return it, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't take up extra time. Although sometimes I say to my family and friends, actually, I don't want to talk about this. I argue all day long, and I haven't got the energy for it anymore. So it's very important to remember that balance and not make it all about law. But that doesn't really stop you liking it. In some ways, it kind of just gives you more energy in order to do it well.
Great. So we have another question. People are asking us that there is this impression that barrister is a very elite profession, specifically in England, right? So you have to belong to a certain class. You must have certain type of taste, like you yourself mentioned, like Oprah, like, poor people don't just go and buy Oprah tickets, right? So it's this very symbolic of certain class, right? So you need to have certain type of hobbies just to enter into this elite club. To what extent that's true?
It's a bit difficult, isn't it? Because if I'm a member of the elite group, then I'm a little bit biased in how I talk about it. But and there is a degree of truth in it. Historically, yes, that's how it's happened. And there is a degree to which we pick up certain traits, certain accents and ways of speaking, and little mannerisms that show that, oh well, yes, I'm upper middle class or whatever. But a lot of that, actually, you find is a learnt act for a lot of barristers out there. The opera, to be honest, has nothing to do with the bar. It's to do with just the family I grew up in, and it's not where I come from in Russia back, and a lot of them were from, obviously my family were during the Soviet Union. I suppose it was elite, but on the other hand, when I grew up, we had very poor housing going on there, and I lived initially, when I was born, it was sharing a 2-bedroom flat with a living room between 3 separate families. It was quite small rooms. You kind of have a lot of these contrasts within the people at the bar, and that a lot of them, they will have picked up their love for their different wines, and they can talk about whether the Waitrose wine is their own brand is better than your Oyster Bay or whatever else. I'm saying these words as if I know what they are. I don't actually, but I think it's actually not that simple out there. When you start meeting people at the bar, and this happens more and more, people have all sorts of different backgrounds. And there are people who genuinely come from really deprived backgrounds. But yes, so you get your fair few Eton boys who've studied at wherever else, and the first question is, what school did you go to? But few and far between, and in part, the kind of the firm or the chambers you end up with that does sort of end up selecting for their kind of people, but at the same time with such a variety. I mean, I mentioned briefly before of how there are people with different backgrounds. And at the same time, the pupil that's coming in September who's done an open university degree, I think she's a single mum. She's done all this study, she's joining us now, and it's actually no barrier. There is a degree to which I think when you're doing interviews or you write your application form, there's a certain kind of presentational barrier, which there might be a degree of elitism in what's considered a good presentation and what's considered not. But quite frankly, you can learn that bit, get through it, and actually affect change in real life. And again, that continues on. The number of my colleagues now who are taking maternity or paternity leave, doing all that, coming back, they've got their greatest cake making skills, that they're doing just so many different people that I think, although it can look like it's this elite profession, in reality, it doesn't come across when you deal with the real people. And particularly, again, I mentioned that already at the criminal bar and the solicitors as well, people are so badly paid that it, nowhere near elite. People are often struggling to get by on benefits. I know of people who have a large family. They had careers elsewhere. They've got this family. They've come to the bar. They've done all their training, and actually they're struggling. They're struggling to get their pay, and they've also got to have some working tax credits to back up and actually feed their family. So it's not all a homogenous group, and there will be a corner of it for you.
That's great, but still, I mean, don't you think that, as you mentioned, that being a barrister, unlike a solicitor, is that it's more performative, and the performance is public, right? And the person you have to get relief from for your client is literally sitting high up, the judge, right? And you're wearing silk, and it's a very, very formal atmosphere, right? So if a person who is not native English speaker, like yourself or like myself, otherwise perfectly competent, wants to be a barrister, but has this accent or maybe, not much of confidence in language, I do understand that this is something that you can pick it up. But still, just for entry level, isn't it quite intimidating? Yeah.
Yeah, it can be very intimidating. But I ask you this: if you want to go out there and make a difference, or if you want to do something you really want to do, is that enough to stop you? Should that be enough to stop you? If I want to go and defend clients who are being thrown out of their houses by their landlords, for example, is it going to stop me that the judge making a decision might look a bit scarier? No. And that's, again, again, I'm coming back to that stupid confidence. You need to bear in mind that the judge out there is actually not that different to you. And I mean, judges, yes, well, most of them are quite, well off enough and middle class enough, but actually they have their own problems. They also get divorced and have boundary disputes. They also actually have accents, quite a lot of them. Yesterday I was in front of a judge who had this wonderful Dorset accent, which, and sometimes I have cases in Wales. Oh, God help me, I'm not very good at understanding a Welsh accent, but then I also sound like a complete foreigner in that. So yes, if you're thinking about, well, okay, in the central London County Court, does my accent quite but it doesn't really matter. And I've come across plenty of people who come from different backgrounds and from different languages, and you know, again, I myself had to pick up a language a little bit easier. I was a child still then, but it can be intimidating, but it shouldn't stop you, I think, is the important part of it.
Great, fantastic. So that has been fantastic. I think our audience is very, very engaged. I want to ask you one last question because I'm mindful of the time. If there are people who are watching us and they are graduating or they have graduated this year and want to become barrister, what is the single important advice that you want to give to them?
Trust in yourself. Really just keep going. You will feel like you're failing at many points, but just keep going. And watch lots of cases. Go to court, whether you go in person or nowadays it's even easier. You can just log into remote hearings. You arrange it in advance. Watch the cases, watch how it works, feel the system, you know, feel what's happening. Read about it. Do whatever you feel you need to do to keep developing your own application, your own CV. But remember that you might have a completely different way of doing it, and find your selling points. Believe in yourself enough to see those selling points in you, and then present them to whoever it is that you need to present them to. That's what I would say. And if I think a final thing I would add is, and you mentioned, Sabaya, about how difficult it is to get mentorship and so on. Actually, it's not. Just email people, message them. The times when people out of the blue have emailed me or messaged me on LinkedIn or Twitter or wherever, I'm very happy to talk, and most people are. If they don't answer, that's probably because they've just been too busy and then forgot. That's not because they don't want to, but just get in touch. The internet is this wonderful thing. We have the power to just talk to anyone nowadays. And I know I didn't do this enough when I was a student. I didn't email anyone and ask them to look at my application. I didn't email and ask them all my questions. Do it, because now I know what it feels like to get those emails. I know how much it's, you know, how nice it is to be able to help people in that position. So there, believe in yourself, empower yourself, and do law.
Great, fantastic. I think at least you have moved me. Like I am now seriously considering like why I did not consider to become barrister, right? So it's
So he needs to know how the law actually works. You need academics to do that.
yes, I mean I did practice after I did my undergrad, and definitely bar is very, very, very prestigious. But I must say that I was quite intimidated. I said, look, I'm perfectly fine as an academic. This is something which I like, I enjoy. But I think, as you said, that barristers can switch towards academia, so academics can also switch towards bar. So I think it's never too late, right?
No, and it's funny you say that, because right, to me, the academic career is far more prestigious than the bar. I wanted to do a, you know, master's and PhD. I just didn't get the funding actually at the time, and so, you know, it's very important, even though it's intimidating to look at this and say, oh, but look at the wig and whatever. Actually, to stand back and think that person in that wig doing all that grand theatricality isn't actually any more important than the solicitor sitting behind them, or the equivalent solicitor and barrister up in Manchester, or I don't know, Liverpool, or wherever you are, or down in Taunton. Actually, wherever you are, whatever job, part of the process you have, you need every person in that for it to actually work and function. and if for a barrister, for example, I can't do my work unless I've got a well-prepared bundle. I can try, but it's going to be bad. And so, and I can't do, I can't come up with creative arguments, all of them. And if there's nobody out there actually looking, for example, at how to interpret particular legal principles and analyzing those cases that come out in order for me to be able to understand what they're about as well. So all of these roles, they fit together, and they're very important that you realize that it's not about the prestige. The prestige comes with how you do your job and not the other way around.
Oh, that's really great. Yes, for sure. If you're good at whatever you're doing, right, you'll definitely have prestige. You'll enjoy your work, and you'll definitely earn well also, right? So it's just not the profession per se, but how much good somebody is at doing it, right? So we can have very successful academics, very successful barristers, but other way around also, not very good academic and not very good barristers, right? Still barristers, still academics, right?
Well, you see, it's not as simple as that, because it's a sliding scale, really. If I spend 5 days preparing for a trial, I'll be a good barrister. And if I've got the papers the day before, I'll probably be a bad barrister. Or rather, actually, I'm still a good barrister. I haven't got as much of it prepared. And I think one thing is very important in any job you do. The difference between a good and a bad, whatever it is how much you care. I put myself in the position of my client, and I think, what would I want someone to do? What would worry me about it? And if someone's only given a cursory glance over the papers, it fills me with dread. And that stress of it makes me actually do the work. If I think, okay, well, I'm preparing this appeal tomorrow. I've done the skeleton argument, I've done the cases, but actually I haven't really reread it, and I don't really know what order to put the arguments in. And I think, just thinking ahead, there I'm going to be tomorrow saying all these things. I have no idea what I'm going to be saying. They're just going to look at me like I'm mad. I'm going to lose the case. My client's going to lose his house. And it makes you think, okay, I know I need to do some work on this. And that's all it is. It's the time you put into it. It's not really about a brilliant skill. Sometimes that brilliance can come in useful, but it won't ever replace you actually just sitting down, doing what you can do in the time that you've got, and working towards being a better version of whatever you are. And that's the only thing you can really aim for.
So great, thank you very much. I think we are over 1 hour, and I want to thank you and also thank our audience who were very, very engaging. So thank you very much, Barrister Antonida Kocharova, and we hope that we will invite you again and we will continue our discussion.
And thank you very much, and thank you everybody for watching.
Okay, take care and have a nice evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye.